Welcome to SASS Mass. This is our spirituality and support symposium. Think morning witchy chats around a warm campfire. The recording is started, and by participating in SASS, you agree to read and accept the terms of engagement, which we'll post in the chat. We ask that you mute during the recording for clarity during the meeting and for the afterplay. Use the raised hand reaction to share in SASS. If you want to weigh in or add to the conversation, you can type weigh in the chat. We try to do a handoff to keep the flow going. So whenever you've wrapped up your thoughts, you can call on the next person. I am Madonna and I'm your moderator today. So if you need any help, I can also help with handing off to the next person. We're going to check in with Maria to see if we have any announcements before we get started.
Good morning. I'm Maria, if there's any new people here. So it's the end of the month, which means we reflect and kind of reset for the next month. So for the members of Bright and Dark, that means we'll get our workbook first part to November coming out soon. So you'll want to just take a moment over the next couple days and save anything you need to for October, because basically all the October stuff gets taken down as we reset for November. And so you can save the workbook on your computer or your phone, or you can print it. We have an option where the workbook has lines if you'd rather write on it, or it's just a blank that's fillable. We're trying to get the fillable to match up with the lines, but we haven't done that yet. So we'll keep working on that. Yeah, we have had a new group of witches come in, and please just feel free to ask any questions as they come up for you. You can never ask too many questions. There's no wrong questions. Whatever questions you have, we're happy to help. And of course, if any questions come up, you can reach us at support@brightanddark.org, or you find one of us on the teams. We're always in there kind of poking around, hanging out. So that's all we got for now. Hope everyone had a lovely full moon. And Jen Marie, take it away.
Hi, guys. How are we feeling? What's going on? I'm doing something today, actually. Oh, that was a lot of energy very suddenly. I just realized, I startled myself. Right after SASS, like an hour after SASS, I'm going to be going to this little oddity shop that's in like the next town over from me that is in an old church building. It was originally built as a church, and it's got this like dome in one of the main rooms. For those of you that are vocalists or musicians, like standing in the middle of this dome, you can only hear your own voice. It's the coolest thing like in the world. Anyway, so this whole place is filled with like tethered objects. So things that are attached to a person, place, or thing, uh, which makes it very interesting, and like it has a stew of energy that is anyway. So she has like the owner of the shop has this like whole stack of vintage Ouija boards and witch boards. And she's been wanting to do these, she's calling them spiritual socials, but these open group discussions among local witches. And so she's been asking for help. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll help. I'll like get involved in the local community. And so today we are going to be having a discussion at this oddity shop about Ouija boards and witch boards. And uh, I get to help guide them through through questioning their beliefs that they have about them, and through understanding some of their experiences that they may have had. And I'm really excited about it. The last time I went and kind of like held space for this group discussion, it was one of the first times that I had done that like locally and like open to the public. Um, they're all practicing witches, but fairly new. So we were talking about ancestral veneration, and that was a really interesting topic. And I kind of held back a little bit because it was the first time that I was like getting to know this group of witches, and I didn't want to like, Kool-Aid man into their like world as I do. But today is full on Kool-Aid man, and I'm going all out and I'm just gonna do the thing. I'm getting to this point in my practice where I'm like, fuck it. I'm so sick of holding back to make other people like comfortable, or because there's this belief that I am too much or that me undiluted is too much, right? I've identified like some more of those bits, and this is going to be like an exercise in that, and a really cool thing as a witch to have this opportunity to like work with a witch board uh, in an old church like that with so many tethered items. It's just like I'm so excited. Yeah, exactly, Ben. If I'm too much, go find less. Well, my thing is that the whole like Kool-Aid man thing of like uh not being expected, and sometimes that like those of you that like we've hung out in person, I tend to be pretty shameless about things, and because I literally live in an echo chamber, I only interact with witches, and 99.99% of those are neurodivergent, and so there's this level of, you know authenticity that I'm accustomed to. I'm not there, but I still like hold back even in those spaces, right? That was a ramble. That was fun. How are you guys doing? Can you relate? Did I start a conversation yet? No, I'm just kidding. I was talking to this shop owner, and I was like, well, I know that these kinds of things, I was like, I can think of like 5 witches right now that would love to live stream in on this discussion that we're having today, like right off the bat. And she was like, oh, well, we could probably set that up at some point. So yes, guys, I've already asked for you to see if we could pull you guys in. Um, yeah, that's a fun. Goose morning. Goose morning. We could come up with our own accent. Hello to all of the brand new practitioners. I see new faces. I see new names. This is a very casual space. There is no form or structure other than we just kind of like talk about whatever comes up. We never know what we're going to talk about. It depends on who shows up. And if you have any like, um, I want to weigh in on anything, if someone says something that's like, you know, sparks some curiosity, feel free to ask questions or like just like jump in on the conversation. Your perspective is valuable. and and it's okay to take up space. That's like the number one thing that brand new practitioners that show up here uh do, is they apologize for taking up space. Like we can almost like 9 times out of 10 and call it. It's really funny. So you're allowed to just like jump up on a soapbox and go off. Hey Ben, you want to take it away? And also, I want to
Hello.
comment on like we pass things off like this because we want to make it very clear that there's no leader here. There's no one leading the discussion. We are passing it off to each other. We are all doing this together. And we want to empower you guys, even in subtle ways. And passing things off to someone else is an empowering thing. Asking for help if you don't know how to pass it off is an empowering thing. And this is a safe space to do that. So take it away, Ben.
So this is kind of down the same vein of like being too much, or I guess like feeling othered in groups of people. Mostly because it's what I have been going off on tangents and rambles between like my close friends and my I'm gonna put this in quotes because it's not true. My therapist, which is my mom. Um and this past week I was at her house kind of going off on tangents about pretty much everything in terms of like government and then trying to find and secure a job, also navigating unemployment, like that whole system and what that is, because every time anybody talks about it they talk about it as like a benefit that you can like apply for and get if these things are true, but like filing for unemployment is filing an insurance claim, and so like you need to have documented evidence for your stuff if you are found responsible for your leave of the job and vice versa, right? So and that whole bit of it was lost to me. Anyways, I'm about to go on you can feel the tangent like bubbling underneath there. But so I was going off on these tangents with my mom, and she was like, "Well, like, have you thought of like getting a therapist, getting a counselor?" And I was like, "Mom, I've done that, and every time they're just like, wow, it sounds like you spend a lot of time intellectualizing your thoughts. I'm not really sure what I can do for you." And it's not that they are inept because they are doing what they have been trained to do with the tools that they have, and they're not going to reach out of their toolbox necessarily because that is a part of their training, right? Like don't suggest tools to people who are coming to you for advice or help if you have not vetted those tools, right? And I get that, and I'm not like hating on that. And my mom was just being like, uh-huh. Uh-huh, because she is a counselor. She's a social worker. So she goes and like privately is counseling people. So she's like not wanting to be like, you're literally talking about me to me and being upset about it. And like, whatever, navigating those uh feelings. And she goes, well, I have books, right? And so she starts going through her big bookcase of books on like psychology and social work and like tools that you might need to navigate difficult emotions. And she hands me a guide to managing unhealthy family relationships. It's Drama Free by Nedra Glover. I cannot pronounce the last name, but the tagline to it is set boundaries, find peace. I'm just like, dang, mom, you don't even like, she doesn't even think of herself as a witch per se. And whenever I come to her, like, oh man, and last week in SASS Mass, we were talking about this, that, and the other thing, she's always like, yeah, totally, like, totally on board with everything we're talking about, right? Because she too, like, even though she doesn't know it, had to pick up the skills of nonviolent communication, right? Because she's a social worker. So she can't just walk into, even if she disagrees with someone's lifestyle, can't walk into the situation and be like, hey, I know better than you, and you need to do this and that and the other thing. Because that might not mesh with the person's life. Anyway, I'm clearly rambling right now. Um, I really wanted to bring up the book because I started reading it and it has a lot to do with that like othering feeling and how to really navigate that within family dynamics, which I thought was really interesting. But also segueing, as I see nobody has raised their hand. I had posted something in Teams earlier in the week, and Maria thought it might be something that would be interesting for me to bring up here in SASS Mass. And I am definitely giving myself time to find it in Teams so that I definitely get it the way that I had worded it before. I found it. You guys are welcome. So I posted uh I keep wanting to just keep calling it. I just want to call it a post, but it was, I guess, like a story ramble. And it was about how I am at least I feel to be, one of the few assigned male at birth people here in this group and that show up. And sometimes I feel like I take up too much space. Haha, Jean-Marie, you're so funny. Talking about exactly what I'm talking about right now. Taking up space. um, because with a majority of women, I know that having a safe space as a woman or someone who identifies as a woman, it can be really hard to have someone who's assigned male at birth be in that space because sometimes that can be triggering. And I hate that. So I had posted uh just that, like, is it even like an issue really? Obviously people have posted replied to that and said, we don't feel that way. And I had ended the post saying, obviously these are just like my early morning I hate the world intrusive thoughts popping up. But yeah, I just wanted to bring that up, like if that's a concern for any other people here. Mostly because, like, although I was assigned male at birth, I identify as non-binary, and in my brain, even I've always thought myself as a woman, whatever that means. So to be encroaching on like a safe space for women would make me really sad. So if there's anything I could do to not do that, anyway, Maria, I will pass it off to you now.
Thank you. I'm gonna pass it to Verity first. Verity popped with the weigh-in in the chat, and then I can weigh in.
Mhm.
Okay.
Verity.
Hey, you're absolutely right. Men in a group with women can cause triggering things. It can happen. But I have found that if it does, I try to stop and feel what's going on with me that's causing the trigger. So you should not feel that way. And I just want to let you know, you have never triggered me ever. And I just think you're wonderful and adorable. I really do. And I don't know. I don't want to sound like, because, I'm an old woman, like mothery or whatever, but you're just very sweet. And I'm both sad that you feel that that could possibly happen and happy that you are so aware. So that's all I wanted to say. So you're awesome. Okay, bye. Maria.
Thanks, Verity. So it was so interesting. Not, I shouldn't say it is interesting, but not surprising at this point in time because, as most of you know, I kind of am first line on the support like email, and because Jen Marie's got some TikTok action happening, we get questions. And like, Ben, when you posted that, I got like questions related to that topic, which was so interesting. Like, again, I say so interesting, but it's just like the alignment, the synchronicities that happen are just I never get it never gets old or whatever. And that expression. So I thought that was super interesting. It highlighted it even more. Yes, thanks, Petra. Serendipitous is a way more magical word to say. um, I think that your participation in the group is like vital for the group. Um, and I'm happy Jemery has her hand up too, because I know it's something like we've talked about in the past, and like why is this group predominantly white, and why is it predominantly female right now? Because we would love like more diversity, but we're definitely, where right now, I think all of the members, with the exception of the few, have come in through Jemery's TikTok and the algorithm. And like, why is that? Like, why are we only you know what I mean? And I'm sure so it's interesting, but I know I'm here to get as many perspectives as possible, which means sharing from all of the people in the land. And so I would like to hear from as many perspectives, that are not white presenting females like myself. Even though I love all of my white presenting females that are here, I also would like more perspectives on the things. And so I've always loved having you here, sharing space with you. I think you're awesome. And thank you for your vulnerability and sharing that and posting that, because I love when we get to talk about stuff like this. So gonna pass it off. Matthew is next.
So this is good timing, actually. A thank you has been overdue. I've thought about since last time I was here. That's very related to what you said, Ben. CIS male, and I share the same concerns with you about, not intruding on space and everything. And I can tell you that this group has been very open and engaging with me, you know, no shying away from any of the topics I've brought up. And I know I make a splash, like I talk a lot. I engage on a lot of the subjects, and it's always been great and safe. And so Ben, hopefully that might inspire some confidence that I'm even a little bit farther over on the spectrum, and everything's been wonderful and great so far. And a big thank you to the rest of the group. Over to Jen, I think is next.
See, I'm figuring out my order of operations here. Like, lower my hand, then unmute. It's working so far. I love this conversation. And not only do I love this conversation, but I love that you felt safe enough to bring it up, like, to us in this way, because I think that these kinds of things need to be talked about more. And if there's like, if we have reservations about fully engaging, um, we should be talking about that, right? Because especially those of us that have a lot of like social trauma, because we hold things back because we believe that we're too much, right? Or that we believe that what we are engaging with is the same as what we've engaged with before, right? And the best way to uh, that I've found to kind of get through that, to change your relationship with that, is to just fucking talk. Start talking about it. Exactly what you did. Hey, this is what my brain is telling me about this space. This is what I'm kind of feeling. And what do you guys think about this? Right. And so that we can help you get more data to decide what you want your reality to be. Um, right. So you can make sure that it's not like a trauma response, or you're not making up your own like uh cage. You know what I mean? And we do that a lot. We do it as a way of protecting ourselves. But if it goes unchecked, like if we don't actually like start talking about what our internal environment is saying in safe spaces, right? Uh, and you get to decide what space is safe for that. Things aren't going to, we are not aware of the cage, right? We just keep ourselves in that cage. So again, thank you so much. I value your perspective. I value everyone's perspective, and I do look forward to the day that we do have more diversity represented in the perspectives that are shared, and that day will come. It's certainly not for lack of like being open to it. There is something to be said about um, this balance of actively seeking that diversity and doing trusting that if it isn't here, there is something that is still uh, that still needs attention, right? That kind of people are drawn, witches are drawn to this space or different spaces at the perfect timing. And I believe that for that diversity too. You guys were called to participate at your specific timing for whatever reason. And I think that there is That was a fun train wreck. I love that you guys got to witness that, like, full stop. It just like boom dropped out of my head completely. So this is fun. As far as being considerate of the space that you're entering, right? It's always okay to check consent. And that's basically what you did as well. So thank you for doing that. To be like, hey guys, is this still cool? Like, are we still cool? I'm not like stepping on toes or anything like that. Because if it's going on in your head, fucking like bring it out so that it can be resolved, or it's just gonna like keep going and going and going and going. Um, I had some. Oh, the other thing is that, and I am saying this, but I'm saying this, and I want you guys to know that I am actively working on this as well. I literally led in with this, right? Of like, I'm holding back because I think I'm too much. And so I don't want to like make anyone uncomfortable because of how like shamelessly authentic I can be. That makes people uncomfortable, right? And the thing that I'm getting is that it's not my responsibility to navigate or manage their emotions about how I present authentically. It's not my responsibility. And I know that my thinking that it is a trauma response because of all the rejection and like literal torture that I suffered as a child because of how and who I am, right? But we're not in that space right now. Some of us might be, but if you're not in that space, uh, then how we relay those neural pathways is to choose differently. And it's scary as hell, but it's only scary the first couple of times until you get that data to reinforce the fact that like you can be tolerated. Like we it we like if you want to try to control people's perception of you, you can try. Like it's fucking difficult. I don't have that time. I don't have that much time. And that's not how I navigate life. So I'm here for it. Like we could do an authenticity challenge at some point. Just kidding. How many spaces can we just like I'll start filming it. You guys can see people's reactions too. Me being me. It's funny. Anyway, Isa, you wanna jump up on the microphone?
Thank you for this space. Well, I'm going to be very vulnerable and express something that I've been feeling as of lately. I really had to think when we were transferring over if I wanted to renew my subscription. And that is not to say that I'm not learning, I'm learning a lot. And I know that, and I go back to what you said. I've heard you say, Jean Marie, that we get what we put into it. However, um, it has been mentioned that it is a very white space and I have a lot to learn. But in the past, I've felt that maybe if I've had something to share, it it might have been just overlooked, and I started feeling that way. And maybe something that made me a tad uncomfortable is maybe a particular person or two might be applauded very much so. And I understand that coming in this year, I knew that I was coming into a space where there's been friendships um, that have been happening within the group. And I am not saying that it wasn't an inclusive space, but maybe that I've felt that maybe some people are applauded for whatever they've had to share, and that I thought maybe at certain points, maybe what I had to share was equally as important, but it wasn't applauded. And I'm not trying to say that I need to be stroked or patted for anything or everything that I share, because some things are just that, just the sharing. And so I don't know how open we are really to maybe other people's cultures, or I'm going to say it. I was told when I joined the group that I had a very thick accent, to which I didn't know I had one because I don't hear myself. Um, and I didn't know how to take that. And was it something that, oh, well, you know, it's something that we encourage, or we're allowing this space to be everyone's, or is it that, oh, you're different? And so just for that alone, I thought to myself, well, I'm going to give it a chance, because everything that I've seen from this group has been nothing but positive. And it also has a lot to do in which light I want to perceive everything that is being said. Um, and if I want to take it in a positive way, I'm going to learn from that and embrace the people that I'm getting to meet. But also, if I'm being singled out, which it just occurred once, but it was enough for me to feel that, okay, you stand out for not being the same, or that maybe when X person speaks, you know, whether it was important or not, I I really grow from everything and anything anyone has to say. Um, but so that was touched upon today. Like, it is primarily um, a white space, which I don't care. To me, I have a lot to learn from everyone, and I come from a space where I feel a lot of love for people, whether we think alike or we don't. Um, Something that resonates with how I perceive. And so I just wanted to make a mention that there are times when, as a Latina woman, that maybe in the way we speak to about other cultures or to others, that maybe I don't know if I want to say it should be a little handled with more tact, because I did have that experience. And so it just jumps out at me when, yeah, when certain persons applauded for whatever they say, whether it's important or not. And I'd rather share and not keep it in my heart as something that will go in my memory as something negative, because I choose to make it a positive experience. And well, that's just more or less what I had to share. But again, I I can't stress this enough. I've chosen to learn from everything that is happening within the group. There's a lot to learn, and I have a lot to learn from everyone. But it isn't to say that maybe there is a little bit of space to grow in each of our parts, including myself, of course. And but that's what I wanted to share. And I hope it's not taken the wrong connotation, because that's not how I mean it.
We have a couple weigh-ins. Jen Marie, I think your weigh-in was first.
Thank you so much for being brave and sharing that with us. Um,
Thank you for saying
what's
that
happening
because
in my oh, I'm sorry, what was that?
no, I'm just saying thank you for saying that because it did take a lot.
Yeah, I bet. I bet it did. And because a lot of us are taught that those kinds of conversations are considered confrontational or challenging, right? And so we're taught to like, don't say anything bad or don't say anything, or if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all, kind of like nonsense. So there's that like, I would imagine that your system is like, in a bit of fight or flight right now, racing heart and all of that. So I want to just acknowledge uh, that this was a big deal for you, and that I I don't want to sound see. I keep wanting to say that I'm so proud of you, but there's that like I don't want to sound condescending at the same time because like I
I don't take
recognize
it
how
that way.
yeah, I recognize how big this was for you. And especially and, I'm not even going to try to say that I can, like, understand your experience because I absolutely cannot. But coming into a space, where, like Ben said, there's so much of this, like, um it's spaces that traditionally aren't necessarily very safe in your past, right? If you'd have, like, walked into this kind of environment. Um And so that alone, like that, I can't imagine what that is like too. And for you to have had an experience that made you feel like you were being like singled out like that, like I'm so sorry for that. I'm so sorry that that was your experience. But and thank you again for sharing that with us. And I I want to the first thing that, like, really came to me as you were talking is that you are allowed to request, validation, and you are allowed to be like, "Hey, guys, I need a little more interaction with this." Or you're also allowed to say, "Hey, guys, this meant a lot to me, and I didn't get the interaction that I was like expecting and I need to know why, right? You're allowed to ask those questions. And I promise you, I give you my word that that will be met well. And if it is not met well, I would love to hear about it. Um, I am passionate about uh, ensuring that that we approach things in a radically inclusive space and we make sure that people are allowed to ask for their needs to be met. Um, and also there is that fine line, right? Because we are working with shadow work, and shadow work is pokey. Shadow work is taking a situation like that and like dissecting it and looking at all of these different uh, ways that our systems respond to different interactions and things like that. So um we at the resource center we are on this like fine line of like we're not here to protect people from experiencing like being triggered because that's impossible to protect people from being triggered, right? Being triggered is where the data is for shadow work. There's so much there, right? Um, wh- what we are trying to do is create a safe place for you to process being triggered. And for you to be able to be supported during that, right? For people to be clumsy and be able to be held accountable and also held during their processing of that, like clumsiness. So it's complicated and we're gonna make mistakes. And that's why I love it when you guys like actually share your experiences and we're able to learn how to support everyone better. So thank you, Isa, again.
Thank
And
you, Jenny.
yeah. Um yeah, I think that is I think I'm gonna ta-da and then like move it over to I think is Maria next? I think Maria. I don't know who's next.
I had to weigh in.
Um,
I'll pass it to Sahara though, because I feel go ahead, and I'll jump in after you. And I love your background. I love your room that you're in.
Good morning or afternoon. I'm Sahara. I'll start off saying that I found Jen on TikTok by a fluke. She just popped up in my feed one day and I'm like, what is this? I need this in my life. So I went ahead and I signed up and put in my calendar to be here today. So I'll start off by saying I feel everything that Ben has said. As a Gemini, we tend to ramble and go down little rabbit holes. And my husband, who is a Capricorn, it drives him nuts. Like it just absolutely just drives him nuts. The ramblings that I have, but sometimes that's just how my brain works. Having ADHD, I'll start with one story and it just spirals, and then he'll tell me you're going down a rabbit hole. So then I have to reel it back in. So you're not alone. I feel you 100%. With Isa, I can completely feel with you in everything that you've said. My background is very interesting. My family originates from South Colorado, northern New Mexico. So we always say we didn't cross the border crossed us, because our family, they're Hispanos, which means we've had colony or villages and pueblos in that area before there was even Colorado, before there was even a United States. Like our family has been there hundreds of years. My dad's family, they speak a Spanish that isn't even in existence hardly anymore. It's dying. It's an old dialect, but our roots were, Spanish, Native American. We've got Sephardic Jewish blood in our line. We have some German and European ancestry. My dad's father was Diné and Kiowa. So we're just very mixed, but it's very interesting because every place I've worked, I always get people asking me, where are you from? I'm like, I'm from Denver, but no, where are you from? And I think that's the question that really annoys the shit out of us is like, we've been here for 100 years. We're from here, but because our skin is different, our name is different, our accents are different. Like if I hear somebody speak from, we call it the Valley, I know that they're from that area because of their accent. And not that it's bad, it's just there's a distinct dialect that's spoken in that area. My dad has it. I've worked with people and I've asked them, you're from the San Luis Valley, aren't you? They're like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, I knew it. But whenever I've worked at companies where it's predominantly white male, the questions and, some of the comments that are made, and it's like, as a woman, especially, like you learn how to kind of like answer those questions, but in the back of your head, you're like, wow, you're really like uncultured. You really don't know what you're like. Did you really just ask me that? Like, because a lot of times I'll get, oh, where'd your family come over from? I was like, my family's been here a few hundred years. Where'd your family come from? And they get offended. So it's just kind of like, I feel what she's feeling. And then I'm in Denver Metro. So Denver it's grown, but it's not as diverse as people want to think it is. It's not. So even a coven that I participate with here, it's mostly white, which, I don't have an issue with. Treat me with respect, treat me as an equal. But be mindful of some of the questions like you ask, because sometimes they can come off as being kind of offensive without somebody meaning to be offending. So I think with my generation, because I'm Gen X, and with my niece's generation, she's millennial, I think we're changing a lot of that, and it has to be done with conversations, and it has to be done with open hearts and open minds, and just having that compassion and understanding and communication with each other. So, but that's, I think, pretty much everything that I just kind of wanted to chime in with. So, Isa, I feel you. Currently, I work for an organization. I absolutely love it. I won't name them, but I absolutely love it because they are DEI centered. Like, we have a whole, our org chart will tell you how many men and women are in, how many are men, how many are women. And of those, how many are Black, white, Latino, Asian, other. And if we have a role open in the company, they'll say, okay, it has to be, they have to be this person, or they have to be like, we're already top heavy. We need to have another Latino in this location, or we need to have somebody of some person of color. And they're very open as far as supporting, the gay and trans community. So we're very, very inclusive. And I love that, because the industry I worked at before that was not. It was a very, you kind of kept a closed lip on everything about if you weren't the status quo. So just having that insight on DEI and having that kind of, taught to me the past few years that I've worked there, it's really opened my eyes as to the different communities and supporting people. And just because they're different from you, try to get to understand them and know them, and yeah, if you have questions, ask from a good place. Don't ask from a place of judgment. Like, ask from a place of, I really want to know, explain it to me like I'm, a third grader, or explain it to me so I can better understand you, so I can support you. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over, because if not, I'll start rambling and going down a rabbit hole. But I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Zahara, quick, am I saying your name right? I know, am I pronouncing it right, or can you say it again for me?
It should be Zahra, but yeah, Zahara is fine.
Okay, I'm going to practice saying it correctly. And just a question, you said DEI? I wasn't familiar with that, but I'm guessing, is it like diversity, equity, inclusion? Yeah, okay. Just like, awesome. So what was like popping up for me, and I'm like happy, to be in the space where we can have these like conversations. I think it's really important. And I think it's like, because we're doing shadow work, and for me, with the shadow work part of it is like, when I feel a reaction to something, I think like both for me, important to talk it out, but also reflect inwardly to like see, why did I have that reaction? And that could be because like my mother said something to me when I was, 10, and made me feel this certain way that I've carried over into now like my 40s or whatever. But it's kind of like that dual. It's like looking inwardly to see, why did that bother me? And then, having the safe space to talk about it. The thing of people being friends in this space has like comes up from time to time. And so I try to, well, anyways, just like for the new witches that just come into this space, Jen Marie had posted a TikTok in 2001. I think it was July or August of 2001, that went viral. And her and her business partner at the time started Bright and Dark. And it was the beginnings of it. And there are some of us that came in during that time that are still here. And it is true that we have become friends. And I try to be mindful when we're sharing space of like what might be received as like an inside joke. Like I try to be mindful of always wanting to like explain things, because there's nothing that we talk about that you can't know about. Like everything is open. But sometimes like I feel like there are times when we're talking about something that we have a history on. And that I think about that like this from time to time, and I would love, yeah, it, because it just comes up in this space. And um I don't always know how to navigate it, like with honoring that I am friends with people here, and then wanting it to be really inclusive, it's so because I think you can kind of see that sometimes, is that people have formed friendships or relationships, but yet we all, I think I know that we all want to welcome as many people into this space, and to when you find that thing that has helped you so much and you've learned so much, and you want to like run out and share it with everyone and like scream it from the rooftops, like do this thing because this is how, like this is where you find, like this is where you get the answers that you're seeking. Is really from from doing the work, the inner work, and from yourself. But like not everyone's going to resonate with it, but there's some people that might. And one of all the things too, like Ben mentioned about nonviolent communication, and Jen Marie and some others have like had introduced that book as something that had been helpful to them, and how to like communicate in these community spaces. And so anyone that's on like the support team at Bright and Dark, we read that, and then of course like anyone else, if that pings you to read it. um it's it's inspired a lot of like conversations, and it's just like helped a lot of people, whether you resonated with part of it or all of it, um whatever that may be. And the other thing too, I think part of it is like navigating an online group a bit, right? Because we've made a lot of changes to the space. And for those of you who don't know, like I don't often say it, but I'm like, I help with the operations of the group. And so but so when I say we, there's an infrastructure team that meets every week actually to talk about various things. And we often make direct changes from like the feedback we get, but we can't do that if we don't get the feedback. So I can't encourage you enough, whether you do it in this space, in Teams, or like privately if you want to email, like support at Bright and Dark. And we read every email, we take everything, we discuss everything to see like, is this something that we, with the infrastructure at this time, like can we make this happen? um but yeah, sorry, let me bring it back. I was talking about virtual, like navigating in like virtual spaces. And so Bright and Dark, like one time we had a Discord, and now we have the Teams, and we've been like explored like more social like chats, and we realized that we wanted to like bring it back to the original like vision, which was the shadow work bit of it with the spellcraft, and tying that all into like our moon cycle. um and now we kind of have the Teams, and we used to have a lot of channels, and now we just have like a few, and that was all to try to just, how do we navigate this virtual environment? Because a lot of us have shared like being neurodivergent too, and and how we, you know, communicate with each other in this virtual space. And this is a learning environment too. So even though that if someone presents as maybe having more to you, maybe somebody else presents as like having more knowledge, it's still a learning environment. And so if somebody says something, or that, you know, like I said, you might have that response, even if you perceive that person as maybe having like more knowledge than you do, I know in this space that would be the feedback you have to share would be appreciated, and it would be seen as like more of a teaching and a learning moment. I hope that I communicated effectively in a way that you could understand me, because I also ramble and it sounds perfectly well in my mind, and then like you try to talk and you know, so that's cool. That's okay too. um so thank you for letting me talk. I'm going to just check to see whose hand may be up. And Melanie, you are next.
I have a question that I don't have even the remotest answer to. And I don't know if I can even get it fully out. So I'm going to be really clumsy in the question. So it's going to require some patience. It just it pinged me when I was listening about the shadow work, and then being inclusive to the group being inclusive to minority voices. And I wondered how a bunch of white witches could do that. So how do I do that if I'm triggered in my shadow work, and or if there's a somebody of a different ethnicity who's maybe not a member of the quote unquote like you know, the majority power structure, or whatever the right terminology is, that is questioning on my shadow work. Like, how do you engage with your shadow work as a white person and still be respectful of a minority culture when there's a difference in the power structure inherent within the greater sort of culture? Like, I was just, it's a really clumsy question. I don't know if I'm articulating it really well, but how do you engage in that way? Because it's not always being triggered in your shadow work, and somebody coming in and saying something to me about how I'm behaving might not always be a reflection of their shadow work, but more of a reflection of my own bullshit, maybe in my own programming. Am I not saying that right? There's just something about the dynamic about being in a majority white space, trying to process shadow work with people who are not of the same sort of dominant culture, expressing shadow work in the same way and not having the same sort of triggers. I feel like I'm not quite getting it. Can you save me, Jen Marie? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
There is no one coming to save you, Melanie.
But I'll try to like make sense of it, of what I think. So I think that inherently this dynamic is clumsy as shit, because so many of, you know, of us, like, I hate the us and them stuff. So many people that look like me have not done a lot of this like deconstruction or decolonization work, um, which is not a super safe environment for our cousins of color and hasn't been. And so there's this like, there's an elephant in the room that uh that most of the time the people that look like me are really uncomfortable with, and you could feel it in the room. And it's like, I like, my approach is calling it out and just like talking about like the elephant in the room and working through things and being clumsy. And it's okay to be clumsy, um because clumsy is a part of the process as much as compassion is a part of the process, right? Does that make sense? Am I answering your question? Like, there isn't a real like, this is how we navigate this. I haven't seen something like that. Um
I think so. It just hit me when we were talking. It was like, how do we make space for everybody when this is different dynamic? And I don't have an answer. I don't even know really. Yeah.
Like we're gonna figure that out because it's happening. And I think that a lot of these conversations are going to happen in preparation. This is what I'm talking about, of like making this a like there's some work that we still need to do in our own shadow work in order to make this a more inclusive and safe space. And a lot of that is looking at our relationship with doing things wrong or being the bad guy or making mistakes, right? A lot of those beliefs are what drives a wedge between like communication and healing in like this kind of dynamic that we're talking about that I have seen. And once you can get to where I don't know, I just like I'm super channely the last like 3 days, guys. That's why I keep dropping off, because I am literally mid conversation and then I get some fucking channeled message that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. And it's like dropping me back into this zone. This is sorry, guys. Sorry, not sorry. This is how it is. And I would not surprise me if a lot of you guys have been kind of like ranty and rambly the last like 2 or 3 days about a lot of things. Or I'm just projecting that onto you guys. Did I answer did that help, Melanie? Was I understanding what you were trying to was I picking up what you were putting down?
Yeah, I think so. It was just like this acknowledgement of what I was hearing from like Zara. I hope I said that right. Zara, and Issa, about just that dynamic that they were feeling, and how I really make space for that for myself, and then let's like address it within the group, and knowing that I was going to be really clumsy and awkward in the question, but wanting to be like brave and awkward with the question anyway. But yes, I think so.
So are you asking how, as a white presenting person, can you, or practitioner, can you better hold space for I'm trying to be too careful with words, like a minority or a cousin of color that comes in? How can you, as a white presenting or a white person, do that? And is that what you're asking? Because if that's what you're asking, we got to ask, not me. I am the wrong person to be asking about that.
Well, is it, are we even equipped to understand the triggers in the same way, or
No.
or hold space in the same way, or or any of that? Yeah.
Not in the same way. And so effective holding space for someone is allowing them to feel whatever it is that they're feeling without trying to change them or change what they're feeling or any of that kind of stuff, right? To allow them to feel that. And a lot of times that's that you get real good at it if you can relate to what they're experiencing and you're able to like really hold that space. And we can't. We can't. But our openness to witnessing their experience and doing our best is what's going to help us do that better, as far as I can tell. But again, like I feel super ill-equipped to have a lot of these. I can only have the conversation from like this, from my perspective, right? Yeah. Jumped off that soapbox again. Matthew, did you have a weigh in, or are you yeah, you want to weigh in? Okay.
Yeah. Something I forget where this landed in my brain over the years, but someone was highlighted the difference between someone a shared experience empathy and a parallel experience empathy. And so I think with what's being addressed, it's, can I, as a white presenting person, empathize with open racism or whatever? No, that just hasn't been part of my life experience. That doesn't initiate triggers that way. I think in the group dynamics I've been in, I think one of the key ways to best support each other having differences is to realize a lot of us have trauma, a lot of us have whatever else, and all of that is just as personal. And in ways, there's no one on the planet that can perfectly have they've experienced my lens empathy. Like, I'm the only person on the planet that has my life experience. So scaling back from that and going, well, how can I empathize with their experience, and what parts I can't, a lot of times is just helpful for, leaning into the parts that do work. And sometimes even just going, hey, I have someone who's parallel empathizing with me. I can't expect direct experience empathy from this person. Just makes the parallel a little bit feel better, because you let go of that additional expectation of the personal experience out of that empathy. But they're still empathizing. So did that maybe help at all, Melanie?
Yes. It was also the like, when something comes up like with shadow work and being triggered, it's what is like, sometimes when we're working on like moon cycle work and shadow work questions within Bright and Dark, it's, and somebody says, am I being triggered, or is this something else? And if we don't have sort of the same inherent background, maybe I don't know that that's not really a trigger, but that's something else. Like, so am I even equipped to address some of these questions, I guess? So as we're working through some of these shadow work cycles, like maybe it's just not a deep-rooted trigger in the same way, or if they're, or not really expressing that well myself well. I'm just wondering if the language that we have right now around how to deal with our shadow work isn't rich enough for everyone that we for everything. Like, if I say something that is triggering for another person, and they say that's triggering, that doesn't necessarily mean I've triggered their shadow work, but maybe there is something in me that's being triggered in shadow work because of I haven't deconstructed. Does that make sense? Like, maybe it's not a trigger of their shadow work, but they're highlighting my own shadow. But there's like there's a relationship there that is different than something that I would be addressing with another white person. Like, I'm not necessarily getting the same, or both, Maria. Okay. That was the sort of one of the dynamics I was thinking about. It was like the relationship is different, because if they say you said this and it's triggering, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm being triggered in my that I've triggered their deep shadow work. Maybe they're highlighting something that isn't fully deconstructed within me, not something that isn't addressed within them, which a lot of times is what shadow work tends to highlight. Maybe I guess is what I was thinking.
Are you okay for the next weigh-in, Melanie?
Yes, of course.
That would be Caroline.
Okay. I'm trying really hard to not self-center this, but I have been through the inclusiveness discussions with several communities that I'm involved in, the knitting community, the spinning community. About 5 years ago, the knitting community just blew up. But one thing is that we cannot lean on Zara and Isa to do the work for us. It's really typical for white people to go to them and go, okay, explain to me how I can change this. There are a million books out there. Listening more to BIPOC people, exposing yourself more to BIPOC people helps. But I don't want us to lean on Zara or Isa or Matthew or, sorry, honey, I'm talking. Can you please stop for a minute? Thank you. He's putting back together our doors. We finally have all our appliances delivered. But I just want to make sure that we don't cross that line and put all the weight on Zara and Isa and people who are not white female presenting to do all the work. To go out and do your own work on understanding non-binary, do your own work on understanding trans, do your own work on understanding LGBTQ, Native American, Latino, African American, and that's just the only thing, because it's something that is, and it's hard. It's harder than any shadow work you've ever had to do, and I still do it wrong. And I hope I've not been offensive in anything that I've said to anybody, any of my cousins. So I'm going to shut up and pass it on to Zara.
Caroline, very well said. Thank you. How can I put this? I think sometimes we as individuals get so tied up in how we're going to say things. And there's a million ways that we can phrase something, but you have to know your audience when you present that question. And what frame of mind are they in? Because when I've learned this just in my years of managing people, you could say things a million different ways, but if that person's in a really shitty mood, they're gonna take it however their mood is at the moment. As far as asking questions or learning more about different cultures, I'll start off by saying for a lot of us in the Latino community, our communities are so diverse. Because there's a lot of assumption oh, we all have the same culture and we all have the same background because we're south of the border. That's so far from it. Even Mexico, they have microcosms. The people in different states are different. There's so many different languages and indigenous groups there and throughout Central America and South America. We don't eat the same things. We don't speak the same Spanish. We don't have the same cultures. But I think because of mainstream media here in the United States, everything is always centered around Mexico, and not all of Mexico, just northern Mexico. So I think it's really, if you want to understand more about people of color, you need to identify which group do I want to learn about, because I lived in Florida for a while, so I have a lot of friends that are from the Caribbean, so Puerto Rico and Cuba and Dominican Republic, and even their accents are different. Their dialects are different. The food is different. And I used to joke because I used to tell my sister, and I lived in Florida, and I used to say the only people in Florida that eat hot and spicy are the Cajuns that moved there from Louisiana, the Jamaicans, and the people that moved from the Southwest, because nobody eats spice down there, really. Like, they don't eat hot and spicy. So it's knowing, like, your audience, knowing who, you know, you want to learn about. And then on the flip side of that, because I like to play devil's advocate, a lot of us Latinos, we like to lump all white people into one group. Y'all are just white. Not thinking that, no, white people, just like Latinos, have different cultures. You know, not everybody came over from England or from Germany or France. I mean, you had people that came over from Russia, Ukraine, Poland, and even in those countries, there's diverse groups. Like I was explaining to my husband, because his family's from Mexico. In Spain, there's over 10 languages. There's several different groups in Spain. It's just Castilian is the main language of that country. But there are people there that speak like Basque. It's like a hybrid of Spanish and French. It's awesome when you learn about the different cultures. So, and the flip side is kind of like, as minorities, we tend to lump all white people up into a group as just being one. And that's not fair, because if we want to be, you know, treated as, or have that consideration given to us from where we're from, we have to give that same consideration also. So I think also it's like not just knowing your audience, but yeah, asking those questions. And I know it's kind of hard for non-people of color, instead of like, because I know some people get offended if you call them, you know, they're just white. Well, at work, we have to say people of color, non-people of color, to be politically correct. And actually, you know, it's helped, but I guess what I'm trying to say, like, if you're curious about something or you really want to know, ask, but like really figure out what you're trying to communicate. Like, I've had people come to me and they're like, oh, you know, your family celebrates Dia de los Muertos. And I'm like, no, we don't, because our community was so different, because a lot of them were Sephardic Jews and they had to hide that Jewishness, because the same people that were persecuting them and kicked them out of Spain are the same people that are colonizing. And they had native roots and they had a bunch of different, you know, bloodlines mixed in. So no, we don't celebrate Dia de los Muertos, you know. So, but I think there's that assumption, because, you know, you see a Spanish surname and automatically you assume, okay, they're from Mexico. So I think it's asking those questions, but feeling comfortable, because with me, I want somebody to feel always comfortable talking to me. If you have a question, no matter how dumb, ask me. I mean, but I think that's because I've managed people for so long that, you know, to me, no question is dumb. Like, if you really want to know, ask me. And if it's like, well, I don't have the answer for you, but, you know, or I'm not of that background, but, you know, maybe do some research on something. You know, that's, I think, the best way people can empower themselves is by learning. And especially now we're in the age of technology. It's like I told my husband, our generations right now that are alive are in the greatest time, because we have access to so much information, but yet we're the dumbest sometimes as well, because we have all that information out there and then we're not using it. You know, we're spending it doing things that really are mind numbing instead of, you know, helping us to learn. So anyways, I'm going down a rabbit hole, but for me, I don't want anybody to feel uncomfortable asking me questions. Like, and I'm pretty knowledgeable with a lot of different cultures. Like, that's my background. I studied international studies and international business. So I understand a lot about culture and different people, but I think it's just, if you're really, you know, curious, ask, you know, but know your audience, know who you're asking.
Petra.
Hi, friends. I'm really glad we're having this discussion. I think it's really important. Sorry, I was like running around before this, so I'm like short of breath. I'm not anxious. I'm just like, whoo! I was like, I need a heating pad. My uterus is very angry. It's like full moon. We're gonna just kick you in the pelvis. I'm like, cool, thanks, team. So that's what, like, for context, because I might appear anxious or stressed, but really I'm just like, I was like, I gotta run to the bedroom, and then my devices were not working. So anyway, now that that's all clear, I think so. I've had a couple thoughts as we've been talking about all this stuff. For anybody who hasn't taken a look at the characteristics of white supremacy culture, I think that that's a really important place to start and to look at. And that's used by like many melanated educators to be like, hey, like these are tenets of the way that society functions for where whiteness is centered. And if you guys are wondering why I'm looking at the bottom of the screen, is because I forget that the camera is here and I'm looking at myself being like, what am I doing? Which I'm going to try to stop doing and just look at all of you. But that's a really good place to start. I'm not an expert on this. I don't think any white person can be like, I'm an expert on this. I think I am an expert on my own journey in this, and that is the only expertise I can claim, is that. And I think that that is also a very like important approach in these kinds of things, is that we will always be learners. And so humility, self-compassion, courage, authenticity. One second, my phone is just like, I'm getting the notifications on the app from SASS, and I'm like, why is it vibrating? Okay. I think that those things are important to focus on. Something that I've observed, and I've had many conversations over the past couple years, especially in particular, about kind of the function of how shame works in these kinds of situations. It's been my observation as an autistic person who is white, that a lot of and I'm not going to say that I don't do this, but I grew up with a different perspective. And I mean, I think that comes from a lens where I learned to look through things from a lens of power. And so in situations where I've been misinterpreted and someone has thought I am racist or something like that, I always know that I have a position of power. And so it's very easy to decenter my own feelings in that thing, because one of my core values is to mitigate harm. We can't prevent harm all the time, but to mitigate harm. So like when I was working in healthcare, I had a situation where things were such that like I was in a student role. I didn't actually have a lot of power, but I had enough. And I got called racist for like a room misunderstanding. People got put in a room inappropriately. And it was in a really triggering time. I'm not going to share too many details because it might be activating, but also because it's not my story to share. And in that moment, I remember being like, there was the part of me that was like, I'm not a racist, what? And then there was the other part of me that's like, this person is in distress and that is more important. And I think that that is not something that, like, there's a tenet of white supremacy, this is where it all ties in, that's like right to comfort. Whereas as white people, we're taught that our comfort is a priority over the discomfort of anyone else. And as I think in a group like this, or even for me in terms of like my own personal priorities, I've always centered truth over anything else. I don't care how uncomfortable I get. I don't care what it feels like. It might feel like shit, and that's fine, because I grew up in a household where we had the shiny veneer, and I felt like truth was something that didn't exist. And then I realized that like that was trauma, and that was other things, and that was religious stuff and conditioning and all these things. But that I was like, I'm gonna tell myself the truth, and I'm going to deal with the truth and lean into the truth no matter how uncomfortable it is. And I mean, I think that that's kind of a core tenet of shadow work as white people, because that's the experience that I can speak to, is we have to build up a shame resilience. So we have to build up self-compassion and capacity to hold our own shame and metabolize it. Because the truth of the matter is that we have participated in a system, willingly or not, unknowingly or not, those particulars aren't like really important, that has oppressed and marginalized people and that we've benefited from. I think it's also really important to say that, like, you can't fight something that you can't see, and that's why whiteness is also really shitty, because you're insulated from the understanding of how your skin color is literally a threat to other people, right? In any given scenario that I'm in with a person of color, I can Karen out and cause them great harm. And that's something that, because of my own personal values, I take great care in those scenarios. And I've also done a lot of work to be like, okay, how do I understand the dynamics of this? And that doesn't mean that I get it right all the time. And I also think that we have to release the idea of getting it right, or what is right, or what is good. Good comes from a morality lens, like a morality binary where things are good and bad. And the more decolonial work that I've done, and the more shadow work that I've done, and I just it doesn't seem like a very useful lens, because I've seen a lot of people be like, but I'm a good person, and do incredibly deeply fucking harmful shit. And so I think that that lens is useless. I think that that binary is useless. I haven't seen a lot of utility. There's a lot of people in the world that people label as bad, and really they've been systemically oppressed, harmed, and then institutionalized in prisons and other places because they've been deeply traumatized. And so I don't find utility, usefulness, or any type of healing in those binaries. I think that if I have to choose a binary, it's like safe or unsafe. And that's person specific. Like, I can only decide what is safe for me and what is unsafe, who is or isn't safe. I can't tell any of my friends of color that I'm a safe person. That's something they have to determine on their own, and they will accrue evidence and experience and understanding based on my actual fucking behavior. And it's one of those things where I've seen this a lot online, where people are like, you know, it's kind of this idea that, like, well, I'm a good person, you can trust me. And maybe it's the trauma talking, but I'm like, anytime someone's like, you can trust me, I'm like, fuck no, like, absolutely not. So I think that I think that as white people, we have to understand that it will take people time, who have legitimate racial trauma and will continue to probably have that trauma for the rest of their life, right? Like, that's not my lived experience. I don't experience racial trauma, but I know that trauma is real, and I know that othering is real, and I know that the pain and shame of being told that you aren't okay the way that you are is excruciating. And I operate in a world where that's not my lived experience based on how I appear. There are other reasons why I get told I don't belong, but I don't pay the same kind of consequence or price. And I get lauded for being vulnerable. I get lauded for being whatever, right? Because I have a white face. And I think that there was something I wrote down when someone was talking, was like, do we want to be right, or do we want to be connected? And my personal focus, I'm centering my own feelings, because I don't know how to talk about other people's experiences. I'm going to be really honest. I don't know. I just am like, here's what I've learned. This is what I know. Whatever works for you, that's groovy. If anything doesn't, and you're like, Petra, that's fucking sideways, please tell me. I want to know that. That's really important information to me. And I do not promise that I will always take it super graciously, but I will always be very grateful. And to be clear, me being not gracious is usually just me being like, okay, and then like not saying anything. I think that it's really important to acknowledge that this work is really uncomfortable, and it's not uncomfortable because it's bad or it's wrong or anything like that. It's uncomfortable because we have epigenetic trauma that has made society this way. And so it takes a great amount of courage and capacity and strength and time to undo those things. And I think that's really important to acknowledge. And I think that I'm really great. I know that I'm really grateful that Issa spoke up today. I'm really grateful, Sahara, that you like you have your experience and your work. There's so much stuff that you've shared that I'm just like, yes, I feel like this is very serendipitous. I think astrologically, this is very interesting that this is happening right now because we're on the end of eclipse season. And I'm just like, of course, the Taurus like eclipse would happen yesterday. And we would just be like, we're going to talk about truth, people. I was like, wow, this is thematically very on brand. And I think that here's the thing. Often in my observation and in my experience of like when someone tells me something, a truth about myself that I don't want to face, and I center my own feelings, it's because I haven't leaned into being compassionate enough with myself with that place. And in my experience, shame, like Audre Lorde has this beautiful essay about the master's tools. And the quote is, the master's tools won't kind of dismantle the master's house. And to me, in society, I see this very prevalently, that shame is is a tool of white supremacy, which makes sense because it shuts our nervous system down. It puts us in freeze. It's incredibly socially effective because we are a social species. We over intellectualize and we think that we aren't, and we forget that we're social animals, but like we are herd animals. We need each other. And so anytime we feel isolation, and shame does that, we will either freeze and fawn or do whatever we need to do to survive those situations based on our previous trauma. I had this word come up and I'm like, I don't like that word. Sorry. My brain was like, I'm very lucky. And I'm like, I'm not lucky. I've had a very unusual experience to a lot of people in terms of my parents both got shut down by anger. They would go into freeze and fawn, even as a child or a teenager when I was mad. So when I was little, that disconnection kept my anger at bay because I wanted to be connected. When I started to self-individuate as a teenager, it was a very effective tool. When you have a mad teenager and you're just like, I don't know what to do with you, and you just leave her alone, a very effective tool. It has meant, though, that I have had to learn to release that anger in the appropriate place. So when someone comes to me about a behavior that I've learned or something that I've done, a rupture in our relationship, that's based in bigotry or racism or something that I've said, I've had to learn to choose to stay connected to that person, and in that way also metabolize my own shame. And I think that we don't realize that, like, taking responsibility for the way that you fucked up can be an incredibly therapeutic experience. Accountability is healing. And we don't talk about that enough. And it's also vital to relational safety and trust. And so you can't have relational safety with other human beings if when they fuck up, you can't tell them, you fucked up and that hurt. Like, and that they care, right? And caring doesn't mean I'm responsible for that you have hurt feelings. Caring means, shit, that wasn't my intention. How do we repair this? What do you need to see from me so that I can demonstrate to you that that this rupture in our relationship matters? And I see this like in a systemic way, is that, like, I think that understandably lots of people of color are really pissed because white folks don't share, they are prioritizing their own comfort, which isn't comfortable. It's numbness. I want to just be really clear about that. That's not comfort, it's numbness, it's dissociation, it's disconnection. So if you want to be in connection with other human beings, regardless of their sex, race, like other identity markers, how do I put this? You need to get practice, because I don't really like the idea of being comfortable with discomfort. It's a cute tagline, but like you need to get practice at being uncomfortable. It's a part of growing, and it's a part of unlearning, because we have been so dissociated, especially white folks, like especially white people, for thousands of years, right? The last time that people that had my DNA were indigenous to somewhere and were free were like the Celts. And that's where I've had to put my practice to. When I started decolonial work, I was like, I need somewhere in my bloodline where Christianity isn't a part of this. Like, I need to find a place, and I need to work in those practices, because that will help me find my way. Because, lots of indigenous people, at least on TikTok, I've heard say this, is like, you're all indigenous to somewhere. And the truth of the matter is that white supremacy has stolen our culture and our identities from all of us, right? Like, I'm white, like that's how I show up, but I'm Irish, I'm Scottish, and the Irish have their own colonial experience. Residential schools and those kinds of things happened there, were tried there first and then exported to Turtle Island. So that's colonial violence has a very, very long history. And lots of times I think as white folks can be really activated by melanated people's ability to tell the truth about their own pain, because we have ignored the pain in our histories. And I think that's really important work. I want to make sure that I give the floor to anybody else who wants it, because I know that like I've been talking for a while and I'm okay with taking up space in that way. But I think that it's important to like hand the mic over, because I think that that this is a communal space. And so I just want to reiterate before I hand it over to Maria that I'm really grateful that this is what we're talking about. I think it's really important. I think it is also long-term work. This is not short-term shit. This is like learning how to live your life in a way that probably has never been modeled for you if you have a white body. So we're doing a thing, and I'm really glad that we are. And I'm really grateful that Carolyn said the thing about we can't lean on the people in our community that are not white to do this work. I think, maybe this is a conversation for like, do we need to, as a community, look at what it would mean to hire someone and pay some extra money to have some extra teaching about things? Who do we want to do for that? These are things that my brain that's like, here's spider webs. That's like, maybe this is a box we unpack at a later time. But I also think that it is important to honor the voices in our community and give them the weight that they deserve, especially when I'm so certain that any person who's melanated in our community has tried in the past to share with a white-bodied person and been met with disconnection, violence, like all punishment, all of these things. And so I just want to name that, because I think it's really important for us to understand what it takes to sit in a room of white faces and tell the truth anyway, because that's no small thing. So I just wanted to share that. So I'm going to hand over to Maria now. Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to share something that I think it was like a diversity training at a previous job I had. I don't remember exactly, but it's kind of stuck with me throughout the years, and maybe it might feel a little bit pokey, but and I hope I communicate it properly. So and it kind of something that Melanie had said got me kind of thinking about it. So first it was that, right, we can only like share or even like the journal prompts, like it's only from where we're at now of a collection of like our lived experience up till that point. And then next year, you know, it might change, or the next day it might change because you have learned more, or oftentimes like you're listening more to other people's, you know, perspectives. But when and then that idea of you know, that someone might say something that brings up something. I don't like using the word trigger, but I don't know a better word for it in this moment. But so that might trigger something in you. And then you might share that triggered you, and then that person may become triggered, you know. And so it is kind of like that and then to me, like my perspective of it is just kind of then why, you know, like why did I feel that way? And then when I shared it to that other person, like what, so someone says something to me that maybe I hurt their feelings, like, and I'm going to feel a certain way about that. And part of like what I learned that day in that diversity training is that like my social conditioning, the way that my brain has been wired up till now, I am going to have a response based on my social conditioning, my lived experience. I'm going to maybe make assumptions, and I'm gonna like maybe have a response. But what I have a choice about is like what comes out of my mouth, you know, how I choose to like respond. So like but me making an assumption about someone, a lot of times it's like, what is that? I'm recognizing that it's actually my conditioning, and that like that's going to happen. And in a way, like not like recognizing it and like seeing the importance of it, but also trying not to like shame myself either, just because but I've recognized it and realized that I have a choice of like what comes out of my mouth and how I choose to respond to that. Um, and a lot of time, like, and also like loves a lot Petra, like of what, you know, you brought to this conversation, um and you know, agree that there's like just a lot of like learning, of course, to be had all over everywhere. And I just have found that like the listening aspect too is like so important, because I think um I live in the Northeast, and we communicate with each other by interrupting people. It's just how we talk. Like you don't finish your sentence, stop, wait for the other person to respond. It's one big interruption. And maybe that exists but it's particularly here, or because I live here. So for me too, like the listening aspect of all of it has been, you know, so important. And to not to like listen to somebody fully. And because also the way that my brain works is actually like hard for me too. It takes like a lot of energy to listen, and not already be thinking of 500,000 things, but I do try my best to try to like, you know, listen to everybody's perspective without like already formulating anything in my brain. I don't know if that's 100% possible, but the important aspect of it is like the listening, like to fully listen to other people, and just to kind of take that in, and knowing when I fully listen to someone and take that in, like my social conditioning might be thinking of a response, but I have the opportunity to like shift that and recognize that as social conditioning, and then learning from others. And maybe then that's how I kind of change the wiring in my brain, but that takes repetition too, to kind of form those new neural pathways and such. But anyways, it was just that person saying that to me someday, that one day, that it just impacted me a lot, that to kind of not shame myself for my social conditioning, but you have a choice to how you ultimately respond to it. So ta-da. We say ta-da because we don't know how to end things. So we just do it awkwardly by saying ta-da. So that's where that comes from. But Zara, you're next with a weigh-in. Passing it off to you.
I made notes because my ADHD brain will jump all over the place. So I just kind of wanted to go back to what Petra was saying about like we're social creatures, and that as humans we do need that interaction with other people. And I know it's easy, especially during the pandemic, that we isolated ourselves, but we need that human interaction with other people. And I know for myself, I've always used the excuse of I'm an introvert, which is bullshit. I'm introverted with people that I don't really know, but when I get to know you, I'll talk your damn ear off. So I'm a pick and choose introvert type person. The other thing I wanted to talk about was like community and the decolonizing. Well, she talked about decolonizing, but I think another thing that a lot of people, especially that come into the witchcraft community, is that deconstruction of your colonized beliefs. And that's really especially tough, like in the Latino community, because if you're not Catholic, then you're some kind of Protestant background. And like with my family, I was raised Pentecostal. So in my eyes, that's like some of the craziest, weirdest shit I have seen in my life has been at Pentecostal churches. So after my dad passed 3 years ago, because I've always been called to the craft since I was young, I've always been called. And my mom, that was her biggest worry because she knew it. And once my dad passed, I went ahead and I said, you know what? I had already walked away from the church and my beliefs and all that a long time ago. But there was still that Christian guilt of, well, you were baptized and you're going to go to hell and all this other stuff that they try to tell you. With Latino communities, especially like with Catholicism, you walk both lines because there's a lot of paganism in Catholicism, but that's not always true with, or like denominations like Pentecostal. It's very strict. And so I went on that journey to decolonize my beliefs. And because of that, because I came out my closet, my broom closet, my mom wasn't happy about it, but she's been asking questions. And she actually sent me a Halloween card. I got it in the mail yesterday. It's the cutest freaking card. It's like Happy Halloween. It's got all this witchy stuff. And she's like, oh, saw this card and I thought of you. So she's coming around, but it's taken 3 years of explaining things because media, or what the church has fed people is we sacrifice children, we worship the devil, we do all this, dark stuff. And I explained to her, like, I told her, you're a witch. Like, you're an herbalist. She believes in like natural healing. Like a lot of the things she does, I'm like, they do that in the witchcraft community. I said, see, you're a Pentecostal witch. So she's not crazy about that. But because of decolonizing my beliefs, I see how other people have reacted to me. So I've lost a few friendships because of my now chosen lifestyle, which is fine, because if you can't be by my side through it and have an open mind to understand it, then I don't really need you on my team. That's just the way I operate. That's the way I've always been. Like, I am who I am. Yes, I have room for improvement, but when it comes to my beliefs, if you're going to judge me on what I choose to believe, then, that's on you. That's not my loss. I mean, it's a loss for both of us, but, I wish you the best and, we'll go our separate ways. But I also see how some people at my work, even though they're very open-minded in DEI, I see how they react to my pentacle. I see how they react to my background. And I've had a few people like, oh, that's interesting. And I've had some people ask me questions, which is great. But then it was kind of heartbreaking because I was at an event in August, and the one person I thought who would be very supportive of me, we were sitting in because they have a Latina group for all of us that are Latinos, and they have, Black voices and, the group with, employees that are of Asian descent. And so we were talking about like, Halloween and cultures and customs, and a lot of them are Catholic. And the one person I thought would have been very supportive of me, like the comments she made about witchcraft and brujeria and everything, like she's like, I don't touch it and this and that, and you can stay the hell away from me. And I'm just like, oh my God, wow. Okay, well, I know your belief system now. And it was just kind of disheartening to me because I'm like, you're supposed to be this person with an open mind. So I think there's a lot more that needs to be like done, even in, you know, a lot of DEI, because even though they're open to color, you know, they're trying to open to, you know, people's sexual orientation, they're very closed off about beliefs. And so even with the stuff, and not to get political, but with the stuff going on in Israel right now, even though my family has Jewish roots, we're very non-Zionist. Like, there's no, I have some cousins that are Zionist and we really don't talk to each other. But then there's a lot of us that we don't support what's going on because there's no humanity in what's going on over there. And so, you know, there's that. There's some people at work that are like, well, you've got Jewish roots. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't believe in killing people so you can steal their shit. I think everybody needs to learn to get along. So, and then on the last thought, with Maria, when you were talking about ADHD brain, well, talking about like interrupting, that's ADHD brain. And the best way I can explain it is our brains work differently. And it's like having several different tabs in a browser open, and you're trying to read them all at once, and you're listening to the person and you want to respond because when you keep listening like deeply and you don't get out what you want to say, your mind will drop it. It's like it's overload. And so unfortunately, sometimes we interrupt because we got to get out what we got to say. It's not that we want to be rude and cut somebody off. It's because we don't want to lose that train of thought. And so I know one thing that's helped me is like, I have to have a notepad so I can write shit down. Other words, I'm going to lose my train of thought. But that's pretty much, you know, my feedback on like what was discussed earlier. So I'll just end it with ta-da.
Yeah, Marie, I think we're going to wrap it up with you today.
All right. Like, I'm not like a fan of like outing people or putting people on the spot, but at the same time, like, I think it's really validating for those like who are first timers here. Like, by show of hearts, whoever wants to, how many of us are neurodivergent here? If you want to, no pressure, but look
Whether you
at
officially or whether you just think you are,
Yeah.
that's okay too. Yeah, you don't have to have the diagnosis officially.
So this is a really safe space to assume that everyone's neurodivergent and everyone's going to be interrupting everyone else, and we're all going to be losing our train of thoughts, and we're going to be going down rabbit holes, and it's just the way that things are going to be. And it's amazing to be able to like navigate that. But I do want to touch on something like, so I have the kind of neurodivergent brain that language is really, really difficult for me. I've only ever spoken English, but I'm Southern Texan family, so I was in like speech therapy when I was young to get rid of my accent. And for whatever reason, that speech therapy wired my brain to look at language in a really confusing way. Uh, and I like accents, first of all, sound almost musical to me, and I get lost in the sound of it. And I used to absolutely be that white girl that was like, "Oh, your accent." And I'd point it out because it was just like this, like beautiful, really cool thing that I just didn't hear. Um, and also, if I wasn't directly, and I'm still this way, directly in front of someone to where I could actually feel their energy that they're holding as they are speaking, if there is an accent, I cannot understand what they're saying. And I have been seen as rude because of that so often. It is, and it's not me like trying to be rude or anything. I literally, because of the auditory processing, cannot understand what someone is saying oftentimes. And Most of the time when I give context, it's met with compassion, right? The other problem, also in some of these deconstruction spaces, is the ableism. Not everyone can go read a book. Like that isn't an option for everyone. Not everyone can process information in that way. And so I want to like uh basically acknowledge that there are those of us that exist, that just going and reading a book isn't something that can be done. And I'm not saying that uh that this work is impossible because of that. It just requires a lot more conversations, and um also requires context sometimes, because those that we are asking these questions and interacting with are very accustomed to what they perceive from us as being offensive or rude. Like, and it's not their fault, it's not our fault, there's no shame in this, but sometimes the context is needed, and that's okay, right? Because of that. Uh, okay, geez, Rufio and Stella are all about it behind me. Oh, you guys can see it. That's funny. Thank you for everyone that shared your perspective. Thank you so much for like being present and showing up. Uh, I have been like saying that I've been super channely lately. And man, it doesn't surprise me that we're talking about this, not even in the tiniest bit, with what I've been like picking up on recently about this, like a pivotal moment happening. And there's a hectic energy at the Veil this year. And I keep dropping into these like spaces where there is celebration happening to the point that I'm like in tears. And I was in mid conversation with my daughter when one of these like episodes happened, and I could see this dancing and celebration happening. I'm really looking forward to seeing what the fuck that's all about. Uh, but it keeps happening, so like I'm sweet, right? And it feels weird because here we look around and there's like this collective tower moment, and like the world is burning, and there's this like yes and that keeps happening. And I can't imagine a better group of witches to be going through whatever it is that we're going to be facing, you know. uh I just realized how like ominous that might be taken. Glad to be on this journey with you, cousins. You're amazing. Have the best week. And I will see you guys next Sunday at SASS. May your practice be expansive and filled with many blessings, bright and dark. Bye, guys.